Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov on this Friday morning when we will be learning together the Kabbalah Café for this week, Parashat Yitro, the special parsha of the Aseret HaDibrot, the giving of the Torah and the Ten Commandments. Before we begin, I would like to mention a very important announcement that this Kabbalah Café is being sponsored by our dear friends Gershom and Rachel Dandy in honor of the Refuah Shlema, the immediate recovery of our dear friend Yoshua Mordechai Ben Fega, Jay Schechter, Shav Refuah Shlema. And I want to also mention a great thank you to Raya and Mordechai for hosting this great Kabbalah Café. And please spread the word. You can do it now. By the way, now is the best time to send a message to all your friends on WhatsApp with the links to join us on Zoom and Facebook Live. That would be a great honor. Just before we start, I want to mention something which just happened a couple of hours ago. A dear friend of ours, Sherry Garfield Moore, her mother just passed away, and we want to dedicate this learning of the Kabbalah Café in memory of Miriam Bat Avraham. She's in America, but Sherry is over here. And after Shabbos, I'm going to send out a message of how you can go visit Sherry. She lives right over here in Rechavia, and comfort her. There will be a huge mitzvah. Yesterday was a very special day, a meaningful day in the Chabad calendar. It was Chav Bet Shvat, the 22nd of Shvat, and that was the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's wife, Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka. That was yesterday on Chav Bet Shvat. I'm holding in my hand a small sefer, and this sefer is called the Hayom Yom. The Hayom Yom is a book that the Rebbe, it's the first book that the Rebbe wrote, compiled the very, very short anecdotes of inspiration for every day. And this is written in 1943, a couple of years after the Rebbe came to America. And these are sayings from his father-in-law, who at the time was the Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. And interestingly enough, the Hayom Yom from today and the Hayom Yom from Wednesday, which was the 21st of Shvat, and today is the 23rd of Shvat, deal with the special mission that women, Jewish women, have in this world. So it's almost like the day before the 22nd of Shvat and the day after the 22nd of Shvat, the Hayom Yom is related to the subject of the great mission that women have. Here's the Chaf Aleph Shvat. I'm just going to read in English, even though this one is written in the Hebrew. And it reads as follows: the obligation of the women and the girls of the Hasidim, may they live and be healthy, to stand b'shura rishona, to be on the front line with any campaign, with any activities which are connected to the strengthening of Yiddishkeit in general, and especially in connection to the subject of family purity. And it's their obligation to organize groups of girls and women to strengthen all of the ways of the Hasidim. For example, in education, which is so close to the heart of women, as it was in Jewish homes for many generations. Today's Hayom Yom, for the 23rd of Shvat, is in Yiddish. I love Yiddish. But we're going to read, I'm just going to translate it into English. One time, the Alter Rebbe went out of his room, and the Alter met his wife when he went out of his office, and he heard that his wife was telling her friends something that her husband had said, the Rebbe had said, and she said, mine, in Yiddish, meiner sagt, in English also mine. She was saying, my husband, but she didn't say my husband, she said mine. Mine says, so to speak. As soon as the Alter Rebbe heard this, The Alter Rebbe said that it's a wonderful feeling. He said this obviously in a spiritual tone, a spiritual level. I am yours, and that's very, very inspiring and very loving. And then he turned to Hashem and said, with how many mitzvahs are we Hashem's? Hashem says about Am Yisrael, you are mine. Just like the Alter Rebbe's wife said about him, that he is hers, he is mine. So he went into an inspirational elevation. It says in the pasuk, "Tzena ure'ena benot Tzion." Go out and see the daughters of Zion. In other words, through the Jewish woman, we can awaken so many special good feelings, spiritual feelings in connection with Hashem. And I want to connect this subject with the concept of the giving of the Torah, which we're going to read tomorrow. We already read it a couple of days ago in the Chumash of the day. But we're going to read it tomorrow in Shul, right before we read the giving of the Ten Commandments, the Aseret HaDibrot. Hashem tells Moshe the following pasuk: Ko tomar lebet Yaakov, v'taged lebnei Yisrael. So you should say, tomar, you should say to the house of Jacob, in other words, to Am Yisrael. And then the second half of the verse is, v'taged lebnei Yisrael. Seemingly freely translated, v'taged, and you should speak, you should say to Am Yisrael. But if you look into the details of the word, you'll notice that these two halves of the pasuk are sort of different points. When we say the first part, Bet Yaakov, refers to the Jewish woman. So in other words, Hashem told Moshe, speak to the women and give them introductory words before you give the Torah. Kol tomar lebet Yaakov. So you should say to the women, v'taged, and you should speak, lebnei Yisrael, which is literally, lebnei is the son, in other words, the men. And if you pay attention to the way we say the word speak to the women and the way we say the word speak to the men is a different word. By the women we say tomar, you should say. And when it comes to the men we say taged, you should speak. In Hebrew, these are two different terminologies. Tomar is, as Rashi explains, lashon raka, a soft way of speaking. And taged, milashon dvarim kashim kigidin, very, very tough words. In other words, more strict to the men. So that's actually, Hashem is teaching Moshe how to be a proper leader. You don't always speak to each person in the same blanket way. Every person has feelings. Every person has a different a different way of communicating. And if you want to touch the heart of every person, you need to speak to them in their language. You need to speak to them also in the tone that they can understand. And so therefore, when we say Kot Tomar, you talk Lebeit Yaakov, talking to the women, speak softly. Because naturally a woman is softer, a woman is more a softer tchunot. Men are usually more practical, more strict by nature. And if you want to put them in line, you need to tell them these are the mitzvahs, and you need to speak more with a stronger voice. This is not just a tale of how Hashem told Moshe to give introductory words to Am Yisrael. When you speak to women, it's in this tone, and when you speak to men, it's in another tone. Rather, it's also a message on how we need to teach Torah how we need to relate Torah today. And I mean specifically the fact that first Hashem told Moshe to speak to the women, and then he told to speak to the men. So we see that in Judaism, women first. And it's clear. It's not only in this subject, but this is a major point in our history when Hashem gives us the Torah. And even before Hashem gives us the Torah, he says, I'm going to tell you how to teach Torah. First, you teach Torah to the women, and then to the men. What does that mean in practical terms? That means that we have to emphasize the important role that women have as far as A, learning Torah, and as far as B, teaching Torah. First of all, women have certain halachot, certain laws that they have to learn. And it's alluded to in the name Chana. Chana, the name of the mother of Shmuel and Avi, the prophet Shmuel. Chana, we have the three, excuse me, we have the three mitzvahs of the chet is challah, baking challah, and it's very popular, especially in the last few years, where we make big challah bakings. We did it over here. Shoshi did it with the women over here, a big event about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago. And very often, women bake challah before Shabbos and during the week. It's their mitzvah. It's a special mitzvah. Doesn't mean men cannot do it, but it's a special mitzvah, which is for women. The nun is nida, the laws of purity and impurity. Taharat HaMishpacha, family purity. And then you have the hey, hadlakat haner, lighting the candle of Shabbat. Of course, if there's no woman in the house, then the man lights the Shabbat candles. But traditionally, it's a mitzvah that women do because it's the light and the warmth and the peace that the candle represents. And the woman brings into the home these special mitzvahs. So when it comes to learning Torah, the women need to learn especially these halachot, which are associated with baking challah, purity and impurity, and lighting the Shabbos candles and other laws of Shabbos. Then there are other halachot also that are daily halachot, how to say brachot, for example, blessings on food and other blessings, laws that apply to the daily routine of a Jew. So number one, these halachot are very important. Obviously, the halachot that men need to learn, practically speaking, are many more. But the women need to learn. It's very important to learn that your mitzvot. But then you have a concept of teaching Torah. When we learn Torah, it's not just learning Torah for oneself. Rather, in Judaism, learning Torah and doing a mitzvah needs to be associated with teaching others. So even before Moshe gave us the Torah from Hashem, Hashem already told him how to teach. First give Moshe the Torah, and then we'll talk about how to teach it. But no, Hashem says to Moshe, Kol Tomar lebeit Yaakov. So you should say, you should teach, you should relate to the women. V'taged lebnei Yisrael, and teach the men. So what do we have over here? We have over here a strong lesson. That first of all, even before we learn for ourselves, we need to be involved in teaching. But then, there's another point, and that is the importance of a woman teaching other women. And it's not just important, but it even comes before the whole issue with the men. Men, in a second, will get to you. But first, Hashem says to Moshe, first teach the Jewish women, which means, for our generation, for our scenario, the importance of women teaching Torah to other women. And this is something which is important in general, especially as we come closer to the coming of Mashiach. Why? Because, excuse me, please. Because when we come to, all along in history, we've had Torah learning, Torah teaching, and it's been wonderful. But before Mashiach comes, this is a whole subject for itself, and I'm going to try to give it to you in a nutshell. Before Mashiach comes, you have the quote-unquote regular routine as far as how the world runs, not only in Judaism, but in general. It seems to be that in any relationship, especially when it comes to a marriage relationship, so usually it's the husband, which is the provider, and is outside of the house and working, and the woman is more akeret habayit, taking care of the home, education of the children, making sure they're learning the Torah learning. But when Mashiach comes, it's going to be revealed that Eshet Chayil Ateret Bala, that the woman of valor is the crown of her husband, and the crown is on top of the head, which means that even now it's true, but not always is everything so revealed. But as we get closer to Mashiach's coming, and when Mashiach comes, there's going to be much more of an outreach role and Ateret Ba'ala, the crown, much more as far as taking care, as far as running things, outreach and things like that. Now, before coming to, we see now that women are, even in the secular world, are much more involved in out of the house working and so now, as far as Torah is concerned, there's no question that within the framework of halakha, it's important that women do take on more of a role than it's been in the past in order to inspire others, teach Torah. And this is the message of this week's parsha. Kol tomar lebeit Yaakov v'taged lebnei Yisrael. So you should say to Beit Yaakov, that's actually the name of many of the girls' schools, Beit Yaakov. V'taged lebnei Yisrael. They're both important, but at first is the job of the women. So that's point number one. And this leads us to point number two. Point number two is that when Hashem gave us the Torah, it's not just for the actual learning of the Torah. Torah is called, we say this, the following verse, when we lift the Torah, right at the end of the reading of the Torah, on Shabbos and Mondays, Thursdays, Rosh Chodesh, we say, Deracheha darchei noam. Its ways are peaceful ways. V'chol netivoteh shalom. And all of its paths are peaceful. What does that mean? That Torah is meant to bring shalom. When you are in a framework, in a room, in an atmosphere of Torah, there needs to be peace. And Torah brings peace amongst people. As we say, that when Am Yisrael came to the foot of Har Sinai, and 6 days before Hashem gave us the Torah, it says that Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Har. Literally translated, and he rested there. just opposite the mountain, right near the mountain, Har Sinai. So the obvious question is, why does it say Vayichan and not Vayachanu? It should have said in plural terms. And they rested as a community, as Am Yisrael. What's this Vayichan singular term? And so the explanation is that all of Am Yisrael, we were there, Ki ish echad b'lev echad. Like one man with one heart. So that's why the Torah refers to us as in singular terms, because the entire Am Yisrael is all one unit. Well, you might be aware that we have also other types of unity. We have the UN, quote unquote, United Nations. We have the EU, the Europe, United. We have also United States, which seems to be also united. We have the British Kingdom, which is a united kingdom, so to speak. We have the former USSR, which was the quote-unquote covenant which brought all of those countries together. So one can ask, what's so special about Am Yisrael being one? Being quote-unquote united? Don't we find these united, this united concept also by other nations and other countries? And it seems to be something which is very popular. Why are we different per se? What's so special about Ki ish echad b'lev echad? Interestingly enough, the answer lies in these words, Ki ish echad b'lev echad. Because if you look at the previous parsha, Parashat B'Shalach, and Paro he just realized that Am Yisrael is not coming back to Egypt, so he fastened all of prepared all the horses and the army, and not only did he tell them we're going to chase Am Yisrael, but he went in the front. Usually, the king or the general goes in the back because he has to be protected. He has to run. He has to organize the war. But he was so hateful against Am Yisrael that he went ahead of the Egyptian army. Over there, Rashi says something very similar to what it says in this week's parsha. It says that all of them went together, belev echad ki ish echad, in one heart like one man. These are the same 4 words. 2 words belev echad, the next 2 words ki ish echad. It's just swapped around. It seems to be the same concept. In our parsha, we talk about Am Yisrael, we say belev ki ish echad belev echad. First, we say like one man with one heart. And in the previous parasha, we talk about the Egyptians. They all went together. They all had one mission. They all had one purpose to take revenge against Am Yisrael. Over there, it says belev echad ki ish echad. Doesn't it sound like the same thing? What's the difference if you say ki ish echad and then belev echad, like one man with one heart, or you switch the order, belev echad ki ish echad, with one heart like one man? It seems to be the same thing. They're exactly the same words, but in the changing of the order, this is where the answer lies. The difference between Am Yisrael and the quote-unquote united of the other nations and other countries. You see, Am Yisrael, we are ki ish echad. We are like one man. Like it says in the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, that Am Yisrael, we have some of us are like the head, some of us are like the eyes, some of us are like the body, the arms, the feet. We're one body, we're one unit. And it doesn't make a difference. One finger can't fight with another finger. For heaven's sakes, we're part of one body. We're all one entity. That's called ki ish echad, as one man. True, we are different human beings, but we are as we are one man. Then you have a feeling, do we feel like we are one or not? So sometimes we do feel in unison. For example, to take an extreme example, we stand in the shul on Yom Kippur, right towards the end of Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah, and we're about to hear the shofar. We feel all inspired. We feel like we're all one. We feel ba'achdut. Or, unfortunately, but at least when God forbid it, hopefully it's only something of the past. When there's a war in Israel, then you see truly unbelievable, unprecedented Ahavat Yisrael. People go out of their way to do the most tremendous things for each other. But unfortunately, in these times like now, like before elections, it's so hurtful to see the divide between people. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we're all one. Why should there be so much fighting over here? And so sometimes we feel belev echad, we have this feeling in one heart, and sometimes we don't feel with like one heart. But that doesn't change the fact that we are ki ish echad, we are like one person. The question is, do we feel so or do we not feel so? That's another question. So that was the chidush, the innovation of the preparation for Matan Torah. Vayichan, and he rested, singular term. He rested at the foot of the mountain. What does that mean? Not only were we ki ish echad, like one man, but finish off the phrase, we also felt belev echad, as one heart. We felt ba'achdut, unlike any of the other times that Am Yisrael settled in the mikveh. There were 42 times places that we parked, we rested, sometimes for a day, sometimes for 19 years, depending on each one. But this one was different. Vayichan, and he rested. We felt as one. By the Egyptians in the previous parsha, Chazal, our sages, tell us the same 4 words, just in the opposite order. First it says, belev echad, with one heart. They all had one mission. They all felt together. Because they felt in this evil mission to chase after us, that it seemed to be as if it was ki ish echad, as one man. But that was only technical. That wasn't real. They were not really ki ish echad. It was all an outcome of the first part of the phrase, belev echad. They had a common evil goal. That was belev echad, with one heart. Because of that, it seemed as if they were ki ish echad, but they weren't really ki ish echad. As opposed to Am Yisrael, we are essentially ki ish echad. We are like one man. And sometimes, for example, coming to the foot of Har Sinai, and I pray to Hashem that it should be now too. That we should also feel belev echad. We shouldn't leave the unity for troubled times, or for a Yom Kippur when we're fasting and we can't wait to have our break fast, and we say, okay, Hashem, please give us a good year, give us a good breakfast. We're all together. That's wonderful. It's very nice. But it's not enough. We can't leave it for those times. We have to make sure that even in these times before elections, we have to keep the achdut, the unity. We're allowed to differ in our opinions. It's okay. But we're not allowed to take it out personally one another. And I think this is also very, very connected with the first part of what we learned today, about the important role that Jewish women have, even more than men. And that is the feeling of achdut, the ability to be able to bring families together, the ability to be able to speak softly to someone, and instead of saying head on what you think, to be soft and to be able to be warmer, to be able to be more inviting and inclusive. And that is the best preparation for Matan Torah, for the giving of the Torah. So as we prepare for this Shabbos, and I hope you're all going to join us this Shabbos over here at Chabad of Rechavia, Nachlaot, right here, of course, in the open area. And we look forward to seeing everyone for this special Shabbos to hear the Aseret HaDibrot, to hear the 10 Commandments, because it's not only that Hashem gave us the Aseret HaDibrot back then, 3,333 years ago, but every single time we read the Aseret HaDibrot, Hashem is noten Torah in present tense. Noten, not natan. Noten, He gives us the Torah. So how special this is that we have the zechut to be in Yerushalayim and to be in Eretz Yisrael and wherever you are in the world listening to this special edition of the Kabbalah Café. That we can hear the Torah and that Hashem gives us the Torah this week, this Shabbat. So thank you very much for joining us. I want to wish a very, very special Refuah Shalema to Yeshua Mordechai ben Fega. We look forward to be able for you to come and spend Shabbatot over here with us at Chabad of Rechavia in a very healthy way, in a speedy Refuah Shalema. Thank you everyone for joining us. Shalom, shalom, Shabbat shalom.